These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs. We are proud to stand with you.
The success of tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal, Television for Agricultural Business Decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources, in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Bryce, and thank you very much for joining us today on Market Journal. Coming up on this week's show, 20 Nebraska educators will have the chance to gear up with the tools that they need to help students become soybean enthusiasts. We've got the details on the 2025 Summer Soybean Institute. We'll also take a look at some of the fresh data coming out from the Nebraska Rural Poll and see what it's telling us about rural life in the Cornhusker State. Plus, Eric Hunt has the latest on weather, and as always, we'll check in on how things are shaping up in the grain markets. Those stories are coming up, but let's kick off today's show right here. The first planter I saw rolling to the fields this past week was on Tuesday. So for some folks, it is now full speed ahead when it comes to the new growing season. But as we know, planting conditions are not the same across the board. In fact, they vary quite a bit from one area to the next. Market Journal's Bill Dodd takes a look at some of the potential challenges that corn producers might face as those planters are getting into the ground.
Corn and soybean producers gearing up for another planting season, field work is in full swing. However, every year producers make a large investment to grow the commodities we all depend on. That's why it's paramount for producers to make sure the soil they will be planting into is in good shape to break out the planters.
Everyone's concerned about the dry conditions and the drought. Yes, we've received moisture, thankfully, from that blizzard, and so it's helped our surface profile, but we're still not a full soil profile. And I don't know that much of Nebraska is. I don't know that for sure, but I just know for sure in my area of the state, as I've been taking soil samples, we're not there yet. So key things for being fit are making sure that for those who receive moisture, that it's not too wet to cause sidewall compaction when they're planting in their individual fields. Every field's a little bit different depending on tillage, residue, previous crop, and where they're at in the state too. There may be places also where we've got conditions that are dry, where that seed is going to be placed. So the key is trying to get that seed into good moisture, but not saturated conditions. We like to see corn at least at 2 inches, but Purdue University showed that we can plant corn as deep as 3.5. And we've had to do that the past couple of years with dry conditions in some parts of the state. So depending on the situation that your viewers are finding themselves in, that's the option for corn. Soybeans, I personally like to see soybeans still at 2 inches deep, but our university research shows 1.75 inches, so showed the best yield. So again, if you're thinking about dry conditions, for those producers planting into dry conditions, that is helpful, planting a little bit deeper, because if they're putting especially a pre-plant PPO herbicide on, if it's a dry condition and that gets watered in either from irrigation or rainfall, if it's shallow, that seed is shallow, it can cause that seed to imbibe that water and cause seedling damage too with some of those products. So those are all things to think about dry condition wise.
Beyond soil types and moisture profiles, a couple other things producers should be watching intently this time of year are soil temperatures and fine-tuning their planting depth.
Other things to think about for if the soil is fit include the soil temperatures. So this morning at 4 inches here in York, we were at 41 degrees. Still on the chilly side, even though we've got some warmer temperatures coming for highs, we still have lows that are pretty low, and so we're just going to have to watch the soil temperatures. For corn and soybeans, we do prefer to see a 50 degrees and warming trend of that soil temp. But I'm also okay as we look at the way that genetics have been for both corn and soybeans. If we're at a 45 degrees on a warming trend for the next 5 to 7 days, that can be a good position to plant in as well. Personally, I have seen in this area of the state, I kind of recommend planting our soybeans first. Once that soybean, and the reason for that is the soybean imbibes water very quickly. It imbibes 50% of its seed weight very quickly, which allows it then to go into what's called the osmotic stage, where it can just rest. If the soil temperatures go down to 35 degrees or so, that seed is able to just sit there for a little while, without being damaged, as long as it's not saturated. So that's why in my area of the state, we've seen kind of a switch to planting soybeans before corn, as well as the yield benefit of that.
One popular inquiry among crop producers deals with seeding rates. This could be an opportunity to save some money for some producers. However, any decisions on seeding rates should always be discussed with your local seed dealer.
And for corn seeding rates, we recommend that you talk with your seed dealers, because those hybrids just vary so much on what their curves are. But regarding soybeans, we just continue to find in heavier textured soils, so our silty clay loam soils, we've been able to drop 120,000 seeds per acre and aim for a final plant stand of 100,000 plants per acre. And we still, we've been doing this research since 2006. So every year we've had on-farm research studies, and still that's always the most, we don't see yield loss from that. And actually the most economical seeding rate is always 90,000, but I don't tell producers that they have to plant that. But it's a way, as we think about economics right now, saving a little bit of money. So it's one place they can do that.
Dealing with current drought conditions could be a formidable challenge for many Nebraska producers at the moment. However, Nebraska Extension educators are on hand to help. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Thanks for that information, Bill. We wish everyone a safe planting season. Well, the Nebraska Rural Poll holds the title for the longest running survey of rural life in the entire United States. It's an annual snapshot of rural perspectives conducted by Nebraska Extension and its Community Development Division, which is called Rural Prosperity Nebraska. This poll is a valuable tool for state lawmakers, giving them a clearer picture of some of the issues impacting rural Nebraskans. Rural communities don't always get the same level of attention as more populated areas, but the Nebraska Rural Poll helps change that. By acting as a collective voice for rural residents, this poll aims to bridge the gap and make sure those voices are heard in policy discussions.
So the Nebraska Rural Poll is an annual survey that's sent out to a sample of rural Nebraskans every year, and it asks respondents about their views about their community, things that they're concerned about their community, their ratings of services in their community, and then some special topics that we ask about every year depending on things that are happening kind of in the world and in rural Nebraska.
This poll is not sent out en masse to rural areas. However, the poll is sent to several hundred rural citizens randomly. That means if you do have to be one of those randomly selected to participate, your opinions will be very important when it's all said and done. We get
a list of a sample of rural households, usually about 6,000 that we receive every year, and we mail out paper copies of the Rural Poll survey to folks to invite them to participate. We do send them reminders and things like that. So it's not the entire, rural Nebraska community. It's a select group. So we also encourage people, if they get the Rural Poll, which we'll be sending out in the next couple of months, to please fill it out, because it's an important time to have your voice be heard about important issues in your community. So rural communities tend to have kind of unique needs and concerns that are sometimes different from those living in urban or metro communities in Nebraska or across the U.S. And we really would like to understand those better. We'd also like to be able to communicate our findings to people like policymakers, local leaders, researchers are able to dig into that data a little bit more to really understand those unique needs and concerns that might not always be heard in, through other types of processes. So
The Nebraska Rural Poll has been in existence for the past 30 years, and throughout that time, Nebraska Extension has yielded some very positive data and has become more attuned with the needs, priorities, and viewpoints of Nebraska's rural citizens.
So we've really tracked rural Nebraskans' views about their services that they have in their community and the health of their community, their economic well-being. And some things we see are that rural Nebraskans tend to be pretty optimistic overall over the long term, but we see changes over time. You know, more recently we've seen concerns about economic concerns, concerns about workforce opportunities, healthcare, concerns about broadband access, but we also do see a lot of resilience among our respondents, that people are have kind of an optimistic view towards some of those things too. So.
The data gleaned from the Rural Poll is one of the best tools out there to disseminate information about life in rural areas to our elected officials. These reports also publicly available for anyone who'd like to look through the data themselves.
One of the biggest impacts of the Rural Poll, I think, is just capturing the voices of rural Nebraskans and then sharing it and being able to disseminate it to people like policymakers in our state, and for researchers to really understand what is actually going on in rural communities and look closely at that data. Also for local leaders to understand what is going on with rural Nebraskans. So we have a lot of reports and information on the Rural Poll's website, which is ruralpoll.unl.edu. We're also integrating some of the data into the extension resource, All Things Nebraska, which is an interactive kind of mapping tool. And so soon, people will be able to kind of explore the data over years and observe trends that we've seen in the Rural Poll over time.
Very interesting to get those views and opinions from all across the state. Now, as I mentioned, if you'd like to see that entire Rural Poll, you can do so. Visit ruralpoll.unl.edu online. Up next, it's our chance to look at the grain markets, and this week had the chance to visit with Darin Newsom on Wednesday afternoon. As you think back to Wednesday, we had a lot of market information, I should say news impacting the markets that came out here about the midday on Wednesday. So here's our conversation breaking down all of those factors. Darin, I appreciate you joining us on what is certainly a busy news day. As I look at the closing numbers from Wednesday's trade, I want to go back in time a little bit to when Darin Newsom was first entering the space of discussing the markets publicly. You were a longtime analyst with DTN. Could you ever imagine a world where we're at right now, where a single post on social media could send the markets skyrocketing the way they did here at the close?
No, but this is the world. This is the world that we live in now. And this is what we've seen. We saw it the first time from 2016 to 20, and we're certainly seeing it this time already, where these are thought out, these are timed. There is a goal for posting when and what comes out. And, it isn't much of a stretch of the imagination to say there was a time when this sort of thing was illegal. But these days, legality is just a word. And so would I have ever expected this in my career as an analyst / commentator? No, but it's where we are now.
We're, of course, talking about President Donald Trump posting on Truth Social, as Darin and I are visiting here on Wednesday, announcing a 90-day pause on tariffs for most everyone except China. And on that news, Darin, we saw, as I've noted here, kind of a rally across the board in the last hour of trading. Soybeans in particular are interesting to me. We don't know how things are going to shape out as the rest of the week is going to go, but closing up nearly 20 cents on futures, even though China, President in his post announcing that China would still have over 100% tariff in place. Is there any rhyme or reason why soybeans rallied on that news?
No, there really isn't. But again, things don't have to make sense anymore. It's all about triggering the algorithms, and the algorithms were fed the word pause. We know China is not going to buy U.S. soybeans. They're going to buy. The U.S. is a secondary supplier, and that's all it's ever going to be now. But the word pause was fed into the algorithms. We saw the buying come into the U.S. equities. We saw buying basically across the board. It didn't matter what the market was, because they've been selling for the last couple of weeks on news that this thing was getting worse. So the fact that even though this was widely expected to happen on Wednesday, that the word pause was going to be used, I heard it from a number of different people over the course of earlier this week and last week. Still, it's what triggers the algorithms. And this is what we've seen evolve over the last 10, 15 years. It's all about getting the algorithms to move and getting them to move in unison and creating these big moves, these highly volatile moves. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no supply and demand. There's no this or that. There's one thing, and that's statements being made by one individual triggering algorithms. And that's what it's all about. That's what my job is, figuring out what that next statement's going to be. There's nothing else to it.
I want to pivot our conversation to a big picture for the farmer who we're talking to right now, Darin, who's out there caught in the middle of this volatility, who likely still has some old crop and getting ready to plant the 2025 crop. How do you go about making marketing decisions in a day where, as I noted, soybeans up 20% or 20 cents on the futures, corn had a rally as well? All of this headline news, what kind of advice can you offer our viewers today?
The best kind of advice that I can give is to understand the fundamentals of the market have not changed. And so if the markets were bearish fundamentally heading into this, and I'm not talking about USDA fundamentals, I'm talking about real market fundamentals. If they were bearish heading into all this nonsense, they're bearish coming out. So if you get a rally like this and you've got some to sell, it's usually a good time to do it.
Okay, well, that said, Darin, let's do just that. Let's talk about the fundamental picture for corn, soybeans, and wheat. Are you bullish, bearish on each commodity, and a quick reason, yes, or why that is on each of those?
Yeah, if I look at our real fundamental rates of cash indexes, national average cash prices, future spreads, and basis, they're all telling me about the same story for the most part. They're telling me that things are still relatively bearish. There's still plenty of supply to meet demand. Now, as we move towards planting season, particularly for corn, soybeans, and spring wheat, this could certainly change because, I remember the day when weather used to matter, and weather patterns still are showing some storms lining up to go across the plains in the Midwest. So, but for right now, as of this moment here, today, this afternoon, heading into the weekend, things are still fundamentally neutral at best to mostly bearish across the board in the grains complex.
We used to have days where weather and other things mattered, Darin. That has not been the case today. Just as we close about another minute or so, I want to get your final thoughts as we sit here. What might be ahead? I guess we kind of put the seatbelt on and brace for whatever ride this is going to be.
Yeah, that's the best way of putting it. It's the roller coaster is going to continue. There's no guessing what comes next. We just have to go with it, and we have to try to use it to our advantage to the best of the ability. And that means using high volatility if we have to. It means making cash contracts when we can. And for some reason, if the humor hits us, to pay attention to weather every once in a while.
My goodness, what a week it has been in the grain markets. Appreciate Darin joining us here on this week's broadcast of Market Journal to share his perspective on all of it. As a reminder, we do enjoy hearing from you, getting your thoughts on your questions regarding the market. So if you have a question for one of our future brokers, go ahead and email that on, and I will pass your question along. The Great Plains Heifer Development Program, based at UNL's Haskell Ag Lab near Concord, is helping beef producers from across the region improve heifer development and boost reproductive efficiency. It offers valuable takeaways for both small and large cattle operations, helping producers make better decisions that improve herd management and longevity. You can learn more about this one-of-a-kind program in the latest issue of the Nebraska Farmer. Check your mailbox. It is that time of the show where we get an update on weather with Nebraska Extension ag climatologist and Market Journal chief meteorologist Eric Hunt. Eric, crop producers are either in the field or anxious to get out and get their crop in the ground. While air temperatures have been warming over the past week, I know soil temps and moisture profiles still a bit low in some areas. Can we expect any help in those two areas in the week ahead?
Thanks, Bryce. I have good news for those who are wanting to get out in the field here the next 7 days. In terms of sensible weather, ridge to the west, trough to the east. We're going to be sandwiched in between. That's going to mean relatively mild temperatures for most of the next week. Probably a little bit cooler on Monday, warming back up Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Probably cooling off a little bit again toward the weekend, but probably just back to seasonal levels. So I think for the most part, though, we're going to be fairly warm here for the next 7 to 10 days. Soil temperatures currently, right now across most state, upper 40s to low 50s. So in the areas where we're eligible to plant right now, I think I see these soil temperatures staying safely above that 50-degree threshold for the foreseeable future. In terms of precipitation, there will be a slight chance of showers late Sunday and early Monday across the southern sixth of the state, but any amounts will be pretty light, and I think most of us really don't have any chances of rain for at least the next 5 days. There might be a slight chance of showers across portions of eastern Nebraska on Friday with a cold frontal passage, but I think our best chance of moisture is going to be Easter or thereafter. What we will have plenty of the next week, though, is wind. So on Monday, we're going to have very gusty winds from the north and northwest with low relative humidity. That's going to mean relatively high to extreme fire danger risk across a good portion of the state. There will be a chance of showers and thunderstorms, though, as we head toward Easter, particularly if we can get the shortwave to move into the central plains. So I've highlighted an area where I do think we will have the potential to get some rain right around Easter or shortly thereafter. CPC is not real bullish on us getting precipitation, but not showing dry for most of us either, except for the Panhandle, showing a little bit wetter signal further south and toward the east, including in some places where they definitely don't need any more moisture at the present time. CPC is showing relatively warm conditions. So again, I think we're going to stay pretty warm here across this region for at least the next 10 days. I'm not really seeing any significant freeze risk for the eastern and southern portion of the state. So again, those areas where you're eligible to plant based on RMA data or RMA dates, I think we're probably done with freezes for the year, hopefully. Senate forecast shows troughing coming back into the western United States as we head toward the last part of April. That will bring in southwesterly flow, and I think that will mean at least getting some chances for precipitation on a fairly regular basis as we head into about April 23rd through early May. And again, I think, look at the European weeklies. They are showing chances for above average precipitation across a good portion of the plains and into the Midwest. And again, this is starting to get into our climatologically wetter time of the year, so this precipitation may be relatively robust. There's also going to be chances for severe weather across this region, so something to pay attention to as we head toward about April 23rd. We could definitely use precipitation out here in the high plains. So again, if we have below average precipitation this year, GrassCast is showing that we are likely to see below average forest production across pretty much the entire front range and into the high plains region of the country. We did see some improvement in the drought monitor, though, this week because of precipitation last week from parts of Cherry County into Holt and Boyd County. Soil moisture across the north central U.S. generally below normal, but seeing some improvement from where we were earlier in the spring. Still some very dry pockets up in the Dakotas. Very, very wet to our southeast where we had historic precipitation earlier this month. Groundwater levels did decline a good bit in 2023 where we had significant drought conditions, but we did see some improvement in groundwater levels across portions of Holt, Garfield, and Wheeler counties. That's good news. And if you thought it was windy the month of March, here's your confirmation. We are well above average for wind gusts the month of March across almost the whole country. And the temperature and precip round for the week ending April 5th, 2025. Back to you, Bryce.
All right, good stuff there, Eric. Appreciate your update this week. Finally today, educators from across Nebraska have a chance to take part in Nebraska Extension's Summer Soybean Institute. This program gives teachers a hands-on chance to work with extension researchers and build new tools to better help students understand the role and benefits of soybeans in agriculture. Market Journal's Mike Straub brings us this story.
The Nebraska Soybean Board is continuing support for the 2025 Summer Soybean Institute. 20 middle and high school educators will experience a hands-on multi-day program designed to equip them with knowledge and resources to integrate soybeans into cross-curricular learning and highlight the impact of science, math, economics, and agriculture.
The Summer Soybean Institute is a joint venture between the Department of Agronomy and Horticulture and the Nebraska Soybean Board to train teachers. So we have high school ag teachers, high school science teachers, and some middle school teachers about soybeans and how they can use soybeans to teach the concepts they have in their classrooms. It really spreads information about soybean science and agronomic science and all of the different careers that may be involved throughout the entire state teacher network so that more students can learn about that information. Teachers use the soybean concepts to do math problems in classes, to do genetics teaching in their biology classes, to do chemistry teaching, and middle school teachers have done like research on history and value of soybeans in the state, and just a number of topics. So it spreads awareness of why soybeans are grown in Nebraska and makes excitement for agricultural practices. The program also trains teachers on all the different jobs that are in that pathway to spread that information to students. The participants have the opportunity to work on curriculum development and lesson planning, and each participant will be partnered with other attendees and the education pathway staff that Kasner has. And then, so during the workshop, they learn about soybeans, they learn how the concepts relate to the science standards, how science and math and everything relate to each other, and then they have more than half the time to work on lesson planning. And so at the end of it, each teacher does have a lesson plan, and then all those lesson plans are shared through PASSL, the Plant and Soil Science e-Library, which is an open education resource that the Department of Agronomy and Horticulture has. So each teacher has new curriculum at the end of the program, and then it's shared across the state.
Any teacher is welcome to apply for this event. Participants will engage with experts from Kasner, Nebraska Soybean Board, and local teacher leader collaboratives to develop a comprehensive understanding of soybeans as a system, encouraging systematic thinking and connecting classroom standards to real-world applications.
Any teacher can apply. So we have had as young as 4th grade teachers that have been participants in the program. This summer will be the 5th year of the program. So ag teachers and science teachers are the most common. They just can go to the website and apply. So starting last year, we've had multiple locations across the state to try and open it up to get more involvement instead of just having locations in Lincoln. Each teacher that applies does get a stipend for attending and classroom supplies also. So the Nebraska Soybean Board has been very generous. Participants have the opportunity to interact with a number of faculty and extension here at UNL and meet with a number of experts through the whole process of finding soybean seed, growing soybean plants, processing soybean products. So experts in extension from across the state, experts in entomology, agronomic production, and grain marketing, and a number of other topics.
If you are an educator interested in expert collaboration and gaining comprehensive understanding of soybeans as a system, while systematically connecting classroom standards with the real world, consider signing up for the 2025 Soybean Institute. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mike Straub.
Thanks for the story, Mike. If you're at home interested in attending the Summer Soybean Institute, you need to first apply. We've included a web link with more information and the direct application along with this story. Find that over on the Market Journal homepage. Well, that is about all the time we have for this week's edition of Market Journal. As the planting is really going to pick up across the state this week, we certainly want to wish everyone a smooth planting season. We'll also be keeping our eyes out here on Market Journal and bringing the latest as conditions continue to develop here this spring. We'll see you right here, back here next time. But until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.